Guys, I don't know who, but someone out there sent me this t-shirt in the mail. It didn't have a sender's name, so I just wanted to say thank you to whoever is a Houston fan out there who sent me this. And I also want to say welcome everybody to today's vlog. Thank you so much for joining in. I'm going to be talking all about exploring American values. This soft diplomacy project that I went on with the United States Embassy. It has been a big theme running through my channel for the last couple of years really, and a lot of people have been asking me more about what it was, what it meant, and what it means for me going forward. And one of my friends, who's another vlogger from here in Edinburgh in Scotland, has just went on the trip as well, and I thought we'd have a sit down chat today to really discuss what exploring American values the trip meant and what it will mean going forward for my content, right? So that's coming right up. Today we're actually doing a very traditional American thing. We're having a cookout in the garden. We have got some steaks that are primed and ready to go on that fire once it has cooled down a little bit. Thank you so much everybody for being here, and if you're new, hit the subscribe button, and also everyone watching, hit the notification bell. It used to be the 20% club, the 20% of people who were subscribed to my channel. Now it's the 30% club. That does mean that 70% of people watching this video are not subscribers, so join that 30% club. So let's get to it, exploring American values. Exploring American values, that was the trip that I went on 2 years ago, 2017, right? And there's been a lot of people on the channel who have been kind of skeptical of it and been like, what was that all about? You went on a trip with the US Embassy, really? It doesn't seem plausible. So I guess today's a kind of good video to describe what it is, what it happened, how it happened, and how we've both been involved. I got this message. I was actually in London, right, for a couple of weeks. I think I was on holiday or something, right? I got this message from the US Embassy out of the blue on Twitter, a direct message from the US Embassy, right? And I was thinking to myself, what on earth is this? What is going on? Why am I getting a message from the US Embassy? What have I done wrong, right?
Sounds like the start of the Matrix.
It really does. It sounds like. And then I messaged them back like, yeah, it'd be interesting to talk. I don't know what this is about, but sure. And they said, don't worry, we can go and have a coffee in a cafe, like not even an embassy. So that kind of calmed me down a bit. So I went to have a coffee with the US Embassy in central London, in Soho actually. And I met all the guys who are involved in the press department of the US Embassy, and they started telling me about this program that they were launching for the very first time called Exploring American Values, right? Which is the title of this video. And they basically said to me, listen, we have done some research with school kids in the UK over the last 5 years about their ideas of what America is, what the British perspective is on the United States. And I think the thing is, the US government, who run the embassy, of course, they were obviously a little bit concerned that maybe some of the ideas that we as British people have of America, American values, and what the United States is maybe sometimes wrong or based on misconception. And 2017, that was the first time they'd ever done it. It was like, let's go there. We'll take you on a full expenses paid trip, right? We don't have to pay a penny, and we'll show you a lot of different things based on these themes about what British kids thought of the United States of America, right? So they had this kind of word cloud, right? And they actually showed me it. The biggest word in this word cloud that British school kids thought about America was guns. And they worked kind of down the list. So they had kind of main pillars about the things that they were going to show us when they took us to the States, right? Guns was up there. Racial issues was another one. Human rights and freedoms was another one. LGBT. Basically a lot of kind of things that are going on in society now. They wanted to take us there, and not necessarily, they said to us, they're not going to give us any kind of opinions or try and give us any, they're not going to be biased in any ways. They're just going to take us and let us meet people who work on all different sides of every single debate. And there would be no politics necessarily involved. They wouldn't give us any political speeches other than to tell us how the Constitution's made up and how the US government is made up. They put us in front of both different parties, both Democrats and Republicans. So yeah, we didn't give it any kind of more time to one side or the other. And yeah, that's how the trip came about. It was the first time, and it's since expanded every year since that trip. They've done one every year, and Jason, you just went on the most recent one, 2019.
Yeah.
We're going to kind of compare and contrast our experiences of what the trip was, how it went. Because I think the first time they did it with us, it was probably slightly different from how they do it now, because they've maybe learned some lessons and taking our advice on the trip, because like it was really emotionally charged. It was really heavy for us to get chucked into the deep end at a lot of these really sensitive issues, right? But yeah, it was a great trip. That's how it started off. And actually, there was just an article in the New Statesman, which is a magazine here in the UK. One of the journalists had found out about this trip and was like, "What the heck is this?"
That's everyone's initial reaction.
Yeah. Like, I think the journalist didn't understand what it was about, and same like a lot of people who watch my videos don't really necessarily understand either. This article came about basically saying, what are they spending their money on? I'll put a link down below to that article, but I think one of the key things to remember is, right, it is a little bit hypocritical of journalists to criticise those types of trips, because I was a journalist before it, I can tell you this. As a journalist, we get invited on trips like that all the time, full expenses paid. They don't get expected to do positive or negative coverage on that, but press trips are a thing, right? And they go to all sorts of elaborate places, journalists, right? And paid on expenses by groups. So in the US Embassy themselves, they told us at the time that before the social media group, they used to take other groups of people on this trip, right? They used to take business people or actually journalists as well on these types of exchange programs. So essentially it's an exchange program. I had to go to the embassy and get a very special visa stamped, which was a bit weird, right? You go to the embassy and it's a big, I know it's a new one now, but I went to the old one and it was a really intimidating building. You have to go through all the security and then you get this special visa.
Yeah.
But that's how this trip has come about. It was basically a US government program to take UK bloggers, vloggers, Instagrammers, people who are involved in creative stuff, journalists as well, take us to the United States and learn about different topics, subjects that people here are curious about, right? And as I said, for my trip, it was guns, it was race, it was about the government, how it's set up. We're going to chat today about our trips.
You touched on there, I guess, the difference between our trips. And it's probably a good opportunity for me to talk about how, not only how your trip influenced mine, but also the fact that you, I think, are at least 50% of the reason I even got on the trip.
All right.
It was a big thing that we spoke about amongst ourselves, because I was in a group of 10 people. I think you're probably similar. We were trying to figure out the criteria that we all met. Another point of kind of contention were described as influencers. There were degrees of, shall we say, reach or audience that we all had. There was some people who had a huge amount of following online and some who had even fewer than me, and I think I have a very small following. So most of us were on the trip because we realised we'd been put forward by someone else who'd been on the trip previously. And when we were on the trip, it was made pretty clear to us how the previous trips had shaped this trip. People had actually more or less mentioned Shaun, certainly alluded to Shaun to the point where I recognised that they were talking about you and your trip, because you'd obviously given me information about what happened on your trip. And consequently, I think our trip was shaped far more around the fact that we were content creators and that we were involved in new media, than it was around kind of hot topics in terms of social and political issues. Obviously within those areas you could explore hot topics, but it very much was not positioned as these people are representative of certain demographics and we're going to kind of put them head first into these scenarios where they have to either defend or even just kind of come face to face with someone who might have a complete polar opposite opinion. And one of the main ways they did that with our trip was creating a theme centered around TV shows. So every location we went to, the themes that we explored, the people we met, the activities we had were all designed to explore themes from in Washington DC, the West Wing, so it was obviously quite political. In Indianapolis, it was parks and recreation. So although that's obviously a comedic kind of fly on the wall mockumentary, it was an opportunity for us to go and see how outdoor spaces and these kind of state-funded or state-governed areas were managed and how they came about, how they were funded, all these things. In Albuquerque was based on Breaking Bad, which was not nearly as I don't want to say exciting as you would think, but it was tackling things like the opioid crisis, crime, the native peoples, their experience of living in modern America. And finally we end up in LA, which was a very, very vague kind of just, here's the movie, TV industry. It was a little bit more kind of the glitz and glamour, the Hollywood, as you would expect. So that was, I think that what they had learned from the previous trips was that it did need a little bit more structure, and it maybe could have done with, on the surface, being a little bit more entertainment based. Yeah. With a view to go in a little bit deeper.
Yeah, because that's the thing, I think, with our trip and our guys, like, it was really heavy for us. A lot of the subjects we covered were so heavy on the topics we were talking about. People were really invested, whether that was race, whether that was drugs, or, you know, gun violence, a lot of different stuff. And actually, tragically, Lyra McKee, who was from Northern Ireland, she was on our trip as well. Really, really amazing girl. She had never ever seen a gun in her life until we went to the United States. And tragically, she's been killed in Northern Ireland. She was murdered by somebody who shot her. So, like, there was a really deep sense of irony there. But nonetheless, gun culture is something that we don't really understand here in the UK. So it's one of the things they really threw us into. And I think if you go back on my channel and have a look at that trip, there's a whole playlist. You'll actually see, I guess, we were all so raw and fresh to that type of stuff in that environment. So a lot of it was really deeply shocking to us. And we didn't always know how to deal with it and respond to some of the things we were seeing. I think I was probably a little bit flippant in making response reactions to some of the things I was seeing, right? Just based on how I live my life here. But actually haven't had time to consider a lot of that stuff. You know, it's been a couple of years now. I've thought deeper, and I think, like, it's very difficult. Even though our cultures are very similar, United States and UK, right? Even though we're very similar in a lot of ways, there's some things that we're very different in. And it's very difficult, and it's not sensible for us to apply how we live our lives here on how things are in the United States. It just doesn't work, right? Different histories, although we've got a lot of shared values, there's different histories there that it's just not right for us to compare it. But whereas I think the problem was, because we were getting shoved into the deep end with a lot of these things, it was basically like, what is your reaction on the spot to some of the things you're seeing? Yeah. And of course you're going to be very defensive about it. Like, you might say this is wrong or that's wrong. So the first day for us was, I think we both had this in common, our first arrival was Washington DC on Memorial Day. We both arrived, I think, at Memorial Day, Washington DC. And it was, for us, 2017, it was Trump's first speech at Memorial Day. So we went to Arlington National Cemetery Memorial Day weekend, but there's like the bit in the middle where everybody sits and they have like the bands and stuff playing. Yeah. So we went in there and we were like in the front row next to the band who were singing the national anthem. All these politicians showed up, and then Donald Trump was there giving a speech as well. And it was a really kind of almost like a shocking experience, because we weren't expecting that for a start. And then there we were with a lot of people who were very involved in the military, who had sons and daughters who had served, or maybe they were ex-service men and women themselves. And it was quite emotional. You know, it wasn't political that day, even though we were seeing the president speaking. It wasn't a political day, but it was very interesting for us to be in that environment and get to speak to a lot of the people who were there, why they were there, and why they felt so passionate about the military and the anthem and all that kind of stuff. So how was your experience in Washington?
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting that the first stop for both of us was DC, and it was also over Memorial Weekend. So despite the fact that I think our trips from then onwards were quite different, they obviously started off almost exactly the same. For me, and I think I can speak for a lot of the people in my group, I think we found it quite difficult to settle in for the first few days with that as the backdrop. Yeah. And I say that because it was very much a celebration of Americanness. It was very much a celebration of, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but America's kind of assertiveness over the globe. And people just very, very proud of being American. Yeah. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but when you aren't American, it's quite a difficult position to be in. It did raise a lot of questions for me in terms of patriotism, and I think it's something that's quite prevalent at the moment for us too. I think in America, patriotism, if you call someone a patriot in America versus calling someone a patriot here, I think the connotations are very, very different. Yeah. And I also think that even someone who might be incredibly left-wing or very outspoken about, say, American foreign policy, still has an element of patriotism that we maybe don't have in this country.
Yeah.
So when you so we went to Arlington Cemetery too, and these people are obviously going through a ritual that binds them together. So standing up for the anthem, their flag, these kind of all these little things that they have that is saying we are American and this is what it is to be American. And when you don't have that, it does feel quite isolating.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely felt the same way, because I can't think of a single occasion that we would have something similar here.
Yeah.
Like, we just don't have that. Yeah, we do have Remembrance Day, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we all wear poppies and stuff. But even then, Remembrance Day for us almost seems like a worldwide conquering of allies against an evil force, right? It doesn't necessarily seem like a day that we are celebrating our own achievements.
No, yeah, I think it's something that brings us together, not necessarily in a positive way, but as a kind of shared grief. It's something I think we can all relate with, saying relatives were in some way impacted by Second World War, whereas in America it does feel quite like an opportunity to celebrate Americanism.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think just because now obviously in the UK you're talking about Scottish independence, what is it to be Scottish? But now we're also looking at this idea of, do we feel European?
Yeah.
What is it to be from the United Kingdom? Can you be Scottish and from the United Kingdom? Can you be European on top of that? So it was really interesting for me, and I mean, we can expand on it later, but this idea of exploring American values. Is there such a thing as American values? Can a country of that size, with that many people, with such diversity in terms of, social background, variety of cultures, even languages spoken, can they share a set of values when in the UK? I think sometimes we struggle to share values with people who live 40 miles on the opposite coast,
Well, that's the thing, and that's, I guess, one of the big takeaways for me on my trip is the fact that, and I guess we don't really know this until we've been to America, right? People here don't really appreciate this because we live in a very small place. Like, even if you take into account every corner of the British Islands, it's still a very small place, right? It fits into one of your states. And I guess one of the things that we don't realize here, and that was my very first step on American soil, was the fact that you guys are so different from state to state. As much as y'all kind of rally around this idea of being American and all that, I think there is definitely this separation in states. And so the states that we went to after Washington, we went to Florida. We spent a couple of days in Maryland as well, around about DC. We went to Baltimore for half a day, but Florida, and then Texas, right? So those were the three places we went to, and they were all very different from each other, and obviously very far apart. One of the main criticisms of that trip, I remember very clearly, is a lot of people said, why didn't you go to this place, or this place? They showed you one version of America when they could have shown you another. But in their defense, it's a 10-day trip, right? It's very hard for them to show us all of the different sides of the United States. Yeah, Florida was our next destination, and that was really kind of focused on guns. So they took us to kind of people on all sides of the arguments, right? They took us to Pulse nightclub, where it was actually the 1-year anniversary of the Pulse nightclub shooting, right? They took us to the memorial event, which was in a kind of conference hall, and a lot of victims' families were there, and it was very heated. And then on the other hand, they took us to meet pro-gun advocates. They took us to a gun show, and from that trip, it was quite interesting. We did this independently, right? We decided to go off to a gun range just on our own, right? We just thought, right, we're here talking about guns. Let's go and shoot, because we can't do that here. It was a very strange experience, very heavy experience, because we were dealing with heavy emotions, right? It wasn't just the fact that here's a gun, hold it. We were also meeting, people who had been really heavily affected on all sides, and it was a lot for us to kind of process. And like I said, we were quite reactionary in our opinions at the time. Like I said, it was probably a bit of a mistake, but it is what it is. We went on a trip, and that was what the experience was. Did you have anything as heavy as that?
Well, I also just want to say, to look back to my time in Washington. I felt pretty jaded the first couple of days based on this experience. But on our final day, we had an opportunity. We did two things. First thing was went to a place called Hip Hop Caucus, which was basically ran by this amazing guy. And what they try and do is they try and engage people politically through hip hop culture. So they do a lot of work with hip hop artists, They showed us a video that they'd done actually with one of the guys from the Black Eyed Peas, because he is, I believe, I won't say he's Cherokee, but he's basically part Native American.
Yeah.
And there was a huge thing in Flint, Michigan with them building a pipeline
yeah.
through the native land. So they made a video, they actually wrote a song, and they had a lot of Native American artists on it and things like that. And their whole thing was not engaging people based on being Democrat, Republican, black or white, or from whatever state, but to use the power of hip hop, and that's not just the music, but just everything that the culture stands for, to engage people that maybe didn't feel like they had a place in politics. So for me, that was like the perfect antithesis to this kind of stuffy, old-fashioned, stereotypical political, patriotic experience as well. And that was followed up with, and I don't know if you did this on your trip, but we were basically set up with individual meetings. And the meetings had been set up with people that the organisers felt that we would strike a chord with, we would be able to create content around based on what we were already doing. And the guys I met were from a non-profit called My Future, My Game, a guy called Craig and Joshua, and basically they use golf. I am not a fan of golf. So when I was told that I was meeting some guys playing golf, I was like, oh, great, fantastic.
They probably thought, there's a Scotsman, we'll put him onto golf.
Yeah, I was reading the Wikipedia page, like, right, when was golf invented? Like, just because, you're Scottish, you've got to have some background knowledge. But it was nothing like that at all. It was actually amazing. He really opened my eyes to certain things that I would never have thought of. Like something as simple as so much in the business world is done on the golf course.
Yeah.
And if you're not someone, if you're from a demographic that maybe doesn't feel welcome on the golf course, whether that be someone from a working class background, or if you're black or Latino or whatever, or a woman.
Yeah, in Scotland, I would say in Scotland actually it's quite prevalent in a lot of the older courses here. You can't actually go on them if you're a female. Yeah,
so he brought the point to me that if these kids get engaged in golf and have even just a basic understanding and feel welcome on the golf course, sometimes it can actually be a massive boost to their corporate career. And then went on to talk a little bit more about just representation in sports. And he said one thing that stayed with me for the whole trip, and it was, if you can touch it, you can be it. And he was alluding to the fact that this other guy opposite was Joshua. He was a younger guy who just get started in, I think he might have been an intern. He was a kind of young black guy from a very modest background. And he was saying, these little kids, they can look at me, I'm this old dude who, he worked in government, he worked in business. They don't have that instant connection. He was saying, if you can see someone who looks like you, who talks like you, who's been through what you've been through, but is in the position that you want to be in, it instantly becomes something that's achievable. And it reminds me of something like P. Diddy said when there was a black president. He was like, when I was a kid, the idea that a black guy could be the president was ridiculous. It's like, now my sons see Obama, and now that's all of a sudden on their list of things that they could do. So for me, particularly also because it was sport, it was amazing to see the power of sport and how sport was actually crucial in representation. It was crucial in bringing people together in an arena where we can all talk football, it doesn't matter, where you live in town or what your wage is or what your parents did or what your surname is. We can all talk about sport. It's a great equalizer. So that was an amazing thing for me, like having started in Washington with this kind of deflating, kind of disengaging experience and ending it with one that felt really empowering and really engaging. I just wanted to get that in because I don't want people to think that my experience of Washington was all negative.
Well, I think the thing in Washington is, I think we were probably the same. It wasn't that we didn't like the city or whatever, because actually we had some of our best nights out were in Washington, to be honest, on our trip, right? But I think just the nature of what the city is, it's obviously the head of the political office. So we were meeting a lot of kind of political organisations there, and it all just felt very kind of corporate and stuff. But like I said, on our own time at night, like we had amazing nights out in Washington.
It's a great city, isn't it?
But definitely on the trip, it was kind of the formal part of it, right?
I think also the Memorial Weekend was going to have an influence on that. It's obviously quite a melancholy time for everyone. So that was always going to have an impact. So.
I mean, the sport thing is interesting because it didn't make up any of our exploring American values experience on my trip. But I've been back to the States since, and I've been to like football games and stuff, and American football, and like it's just been really eye opening. Like I think they enjoy American football in the United States in a very different way from how we enjoy football here or soccer.
Well, that was actually something I wanted to talk to you about. The next stop for us was Indianapolis, and that was where the NCAA Hall of Champions is. So we went there and we were getting a talk about inclusion. So trying to get more women into collegiate sports and getting more funding. There was at the time a little bit of controversy, and some of your viewers will know more about it than I do. Sorry, but this idea that the college sports system is incredibly lucrative. Someone told me that one of the college football coaches or basketball coaches was the highest paid public employee in the country.
Wow, that's mad.
Yeah, and yet all of the players are amateurs.
Yeah.
So none of them get paid any money. Now, one side of that argument is they're getting a scholarship paid for, they're getting educated for free, and they're getting an opportunity to be part of a system that could then funnel them into professional sports. The other side of that is that there's someone making a huge amount of money, whether that be the colleges, whether that be the people within the colleges, making a lot of money off of those athletes. But going back onto like American values, again, obviously wanting to explore sport and fitness and American values through that lens.
Which is great for you as well. Just to say that, Jason, you do a lot of fitness stuff. That's what you do, right?
Yeah.
For anybody that's not like come onto.
I do try and do it in a way that is inclusive. Yeah. So not for people who are already mad about fitness or mad about sport, but rather in a way of saying this could be a way for you to explore, your potential, to enjoy different elements of your personality and abilities in a way that you haven't done before. Yeah. And so, although the trip wasn't necessarily centered around it, I did try and find those elements everywhere I went. Yeah. And we went to a baseball game, which was another really interesting thing as well, a minor league baseball game. Basically, if you had to compare it to something in the UK, it would be like the first division or like League One or championship level. But what was crazy is the stadium was huge and it was packed. And again, going back to this idea of college sports, I know that Michigan football, they have a stadium that is 100,000 people. So mad. And that's just the college game. Yeah. It's not even professionals. So what I thought was really interesting is like just how support for a team, and also how support for say your college team or even like lower down local team, how that impacts your American values. Yeah. Or how does that,
it's not a factor here. If you have any amateur sport, there's probably more players than there are people watching.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like I know. Recently, Liverpool under-23s played Spartans. For anyone who doesn't know, Edinburgh Spartans are like, I don't even know what you'd compare them to. They're not even a minor league team. They're not even a college team. Like a very, very kind of, Sunday league, which is the term that we would say here. It's just the system in America, I think, is really built up to. I think the idea that you could be really good at a sport and yet you have to achieve a certain grade to then get into college, but then also the fact that you're playing sport at college while getting your degree, I think it really does show the importance of being kind of physically literate as well as educationally literate. Yeah, for sure. This idea that you may be on the track to be a professional sportsman, but you never know, like you could break your leg or you could have a horrible injury, and then what have you got? There's so many football players in this country, soccer players in this country, who are the next big thing, and then they get a career-ending injury at 21 and they've not even got like standard grades, GCSEs. So the idea that there's very much a kind of marriage, to me it almost feels like this Greek ideal of, you need to be a thinker, but you also need to be an athlete. Yeah. And that's what I loved, and I think that does play a big role in American values.
And I say to contrast that to us, I say that we only value sport at the high end, right? We value teams that are performing well. We value, the Premier League, the biggest league of football in the world, right? We value it at the top end, right? But the coming up of the youngsters and stuff, like it's not valued. And like you said, if there's a young player 20-year-old and he breaks his leg and his career's over. Like, and nobody's going to care about that. He's going to be just another one, right? But I think another thing interesting about team sports in America, that from the experience I had, is the fact that it's a very patriotic experience again.
Yeah.
Sing the national anthem, they got the fireworks, and these are two teams, right, from different cities. Whereas here, any team sport, you wouldn't have that, right? We don't have any display of patriotism other than towards our team. So I think that's an interesting contrast as well.
Definitely. This was another thing that we did. I don't know if you did it, but when I was in Indianapolis, we were sent to like a host family to have dinner. And I was very, very lucky. I got an amazing family, a couple and their 3 sons. And I had a great conversation about Scottish history, British history, American history, politics, but not opinionated politics, just literal, how does the process work here versus how does the process work there. I was talking a lot about the difference between devolution and federalism, which was something that I was really interested in. And overall, I mean, we chatted about soccer, because Liverpool, who are the team I support, were just about to win the Champions League. And I did actually find that soccer does seem to be growing. People do seem to, maybe not necessarily in America, but people are certainly a little bit more interested in Champions League football, or in at least the Premier League as well. But I had an amazing experience with those guys, and they were really interested in, as you say, like why I was there, what the process was. Not quick to kind of shoot it down and say, why are we spending taxpayers' money on this? But rather like, what was your experience of America, and what do you think you could take away from it? Other people in my group didn't have as enriching an experience, shall we say? I won't divulge any of their stories, but what I thought was, I just thought that it was a really amazing experience. It could have gone either way, because I think you could have ended up with people who were very, very different, who you maybe had nothing in common with. But I really did see it as an opportunity to, as cliche as it sounds, like meet real Americans. Is that something that you did?
Yeah, absolutely. So we did exactly the same thing in Texas, and I don't know how the embassy organises this, but there seems to be a lot of families out there in the United States who take essentially strangers from diplomatic missions into their home for dinner, right? In different parts of the country. So I did exactly the same thing in Texas. It was myself, Lira, as I talked about earlier, and Jazza, another guy from London who's a YouTuber. And we went into this family's home in Texas, and it was exactly as you said. It was probably one of the best nights of my whole trip. I didn't film any of it. It wasn't on the vlog. It was just a personal experience that we had. We had a barbecue at this family's home, and we talked about politics, but in a very kind of civil, matter-of-fact way. But it was more of a learning experience about how things are where they live, and it was just a great night, right? We just talked a lot. We were honest in a very respectful manner, and we just all enjoyed each other's company, and it was just a really, really fantastic night of diplomacy, I think. As a matter of fact, the whole thing, the reason why the United States Embassy is doing this is soft diplomacy, right? That's what the term is known for, this type of thing. And I felt that was a real kind of good example of it, right? We were really getting to know an American family, how they live. We'd never met before.
And I think it's also an opportunity for people, I think maybe Americans see this as something for us, when actually it was a way for them to, meet us firsthand. So rather than maybe just watching our content and going, oh, that's what they got from the experience, it's like, you can actually meet these people. And you can, because obviously they're going to get exactly the same impression of us through our content as we do of America through the media. So to actually meet people and see what they want from the experience, because that was a big thing that people kept saying to us, was going into someone's house in a foreign country with no idea who they are, what they're about, whether they'll like you or whether they won't. And it really does kind of highlight and it reminds you that we're all just people. And we all have the same wants and desires and needs. So that was a really positive experience.
It was a great experience. And another one, like kind of touching on the thing you've just said there, is we were invited into the headquarters of the NRA, right, the National Rifle Association. It was very heated, but the interesting thing about that experience was it was kind of a two-way dialogue, right? The NRA never ever allows or invites foreign dignitaries, journalists, into their headquarters to discuss the topic of guns, right? They don't do it. It's almost like a policy. But for whatever reason, they decided that we would be the first foreign dignitaries to be allowed into the head office.
And last.
And maybe the last. Again, like I said about that issue, is we were very fresh to it, the idea of it, and we were just like, well, we don't have it, and you guys are wrong.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it was a frank exchange, and actually it was quite valuable as well to have that experience. And I think it was probably interesting for the NRA guys as well to have a group like us in there and have like a kind of back and forward debate. So yeah, we did a lot of things like that. And also, like you said about the kind of non-profits, we met a lot of small non-profit enterprises around the States, whether it was in Florida, whether it was in DC, and also in Texas as well. And they dealt with a range of topics, whether it was religion, again, guns was a big one. We met a lot of non-profits on both sides. Mm-hmm. Also, interestingly, in Texas, we went to the local headquarters of both the Texas Republicans and Democrats. And you know what, that was a really fun day. We ended up just having a good laugh with both sets of people. But I think it's very important to put this across. The embassy were not trying to push us in any direction on any issue. They were just taking us there to show us and let us kind of explore and come up with our own conclusions.
Yeah, I would even say the people who were the spokespeople or at the forefront of the activities and events we were doing, even they weren't trying to push anything on us. They were literally just trying to say their piece and explain the way it was. But it was interesting you talk about non-profits there, because obviously we had a lot of experience with non-profits and people who had put together organizations who purely just because we're a group of people who we care about this thing and we want to come together and make a difference. An amazing thing that I was told about was a thing called November Project in Indianapolis. It's actually around the world, but it's free outdoor fitness classes, which you literally just turn up to. They do the class outdoors in parks or in parts of the city where you would normally never think of doing fitness, which is obviously something that I try and do in this city is integrating fitness places that you wouldn't think of it. And I had the chance to chat to a guy called Jason who worked with them, and I thought that was amazing because that was just a group of people doing a thing, giving something to other people for no other reason than that they had the passion for doing it. And also to go along the lines of the Parks and Recreation theme, we met like Parks and Rec managers. And what I thought was really interesting, and I've told you this story before, we went to this beautiful park in this place called Fishers, which is just outside Indianapolis. And it was manicured lawns. But the thing that struck out was there was a huge stage at the back, these massive speakers and lights, like Glastonbury, like hammocks hanging up, and they were like, oh yeah, every Friday we have a free concert. It's like we've had Grammy Award winning artists here. You can just, if you're part of the community, just come along and watch.
That's so cool.
First thing I said was, if that was in Scotland, speakers would have been nicked and the hammocks would be on fire.
Yeah.
So what I thought was amazing there is the difference between state-funded things and kind of privately funded things. And just a big thing for me was the motivation and the inclusion of people in their communities. And obviously not every community is like that, but it was the idea that we all live here together and these are all the things that we care about. So this is what we want our money to be invested in, our efforts to be invested in. To create a comparison, if I'm in the Meadows and a sign goes up saying new tennis courts, I look at that and I go, oh, I never asked for new tennis courts.
Yeah.
But I don't do anything about it. I don't complain about it. I certainly didn't petition for tennis courts in the first place. And I'm not going to come forward with a better idea. I just let it happen. Yeah. You kind of defer responsibility to people at the top. And although I'm a big believer in decentralized government and having that security net and having public services, I think there's something about Americans that gives them a little bit more motivation to act and a little bit more energy to do what they want and find the people that want the same as them and actually make real change. So I think non-profits have a huge role in that. I think a lot of people could criticize and say, well, if there was more government spending or if the government put more money into these initiatives, there wouldn't need to be non-profits. And that is an argument. But I do think, consequently, because of that, there are people who are just motivated to make change without the helping hand of the kind of local authorities.
Well, that's it. I mean, a lot of the people we spoke to, they were doing it out of a passion for their community, or a need for change to happen in the community. Maybe they'd been through a traumatic experience in their own lives, and their way of dealing and coping was to take action, right? So I think that's fascinating, and those are the types of community leaders that really make a difference, I think. And it kind of made me feel like, wow, there's so many inspiring people there doing this that really, really helped people in their local communities, right? Changed people's lives. Instead of me just being in awe of what they're doing, what are we doing here in our city where there's a lot of people struggling as well? We've just had like stats come out about the number of people that died in Scotland last year from overdoses, right? And it's the highest in Europe. It's overtaken America. Right? There's obviously a lot of kind of politics involved in, like, in Scotland we don't have all the powers necessary to deal with that. A lot of it sits with Westminster, but actually that's not entirely true, because we could be doing things to change that. Locally, in terms of organisations like the ones we saw in the States. What can we be doing to tackle that?
Definitely. Like I'll skip past Albuquerque and come back round to it, but when we were in LA, we met people called it was called Heart of LA, which was again a privately funded inner city kind of center for kids to come to, where they could learn dance, play instruments, be involved in sports. One of the most amazing things, demonstration of the work they were doing, was there was a park opposite that was actually featured in the film Training Day. And apparently the guy described it said at 12 o'clock in the afternoon you wouldn't walk through that because you'd be worried about getting shot or mugged. And now we looked over, there's kids playing basketball, kids playing soccer, people, it just looked like a lovely park. And it had all been done by the funding that the centre had brought. And another place was called Inner City Arts, which again was an opportunity for kids to do kind of extracurricular things that they would never get at schools. And for me, the point it really raised was, which I guess the whole trip is an indicator of, is what role can we play as influencers, as content creators? I think you think that you're just making your stuff and it is what it is. I'm making a silly video about X, Y, or Z, or I'm having a good time and I'm documenting it. But are you in a position to influence real change and affect real people and engage people who feel the same as you through your content? And it was something that I left feeling humbled by, almost slightly embarrassed by, that I wasn't doing more to
absolutely agree
with what I had, because I think it's really easy, as you've just said, like the culture here is to kind of defer responsibility to the people who have the power, and you don't realize how much power you have, and you can only cultivate that if you do use it and if you are aware of it. And so that's a big thing that I left kind of thinking, I need to do more with what I've got. I need to reach out to more people. I need to work with more people who are like me. And we need our content to be something more than just a form of entertainment, but actually as a kind of tool for action.
Yeah, for sure. I think I definitely felt exactly the same way. So I think there is a sense that a lot of my content, for example, is about soft entertainment, right? It's about connecting people from different parts of the world and also showing them Scotland, but in a very plain and simple way that doesn't really change the world. It's a storytelling, but it's soft. But like, I was definitely thinking to myself, okay, what more can I do as well to actually change people's lives? And to be honest, I've been on that journey ever since then to try and see if there is anything else I could do. I would love to make proper documentaries. Still going on very positive a message, like for example, doing challenges and to inspire people to shake free from anxiety. That's a big thing for me, to get rid of anxiety and push themselves and challenge themselves to do more. There's also a case to kind of document the stories of people doing really hard and difficult stuff that might be making positive changes in the community as well, but that is it's heavier content, right? But yeah, it definitely brings it home. I think that was one of the big takeaways for me is, what are we doing with our content? What stories are we telling? And are we changing people's lives? And that's a question I asked myself a lot ever since. But you know what? I think for me, this trip overall was a massive success. It gave me a lot. Hopefully I provided a lot of value back, right? In telling the story, but it gave me more context into what United States is. I've since went back to the United States 2 or 3 times, and I'm going back again very soon because of that trip. That was the start of my love affair with America. So in that sense, the trip was a success, right? Massive success. I've been able to connect with thousands of people from the United States because of that trip, because that trip kind of started my love affair, if you like. So it's been a massive positive influence in my life. And also I was working in a place that wouldn't let me have the time away when I was offered that trip. So I quit my job, and I've been kind of making this content full time ever since. So that's a massive benefit for me. And like I said, it's definitely been life changing.
I'll definitely give you my piece on that, but I'll just touch briefly on the third stop, which was Albuquerque, which, as I said, Breaking Bad, that's what everybody thinks of, and apparently it's had a massive effect on their tourism in terms of people from Europe, they say, will come to Albuquerque because of Breaking Bad, which I thought was amazing in itself. But one of the best experiences I had there was I met John Jones randomly, so he's the UFC light heavyweight champion, literally randomly in Santa Fe, sitting on a bench, in disguise on the phone. I'm hanging around like a creepy teenager at a One Direction concert. Met him, lovely guy. Next day, we had an amazing conversation with a police officer in the Albuquerque police, and obviously was talking about the opioid crisis there. Was talking about the effect that has on crime. And obviously we touched on, gun control and how people feel the need for guns and how guns are portrayed. But it was very, very kind of brief. But I used that as an opportunity to ask him about John Jones obviously trains in Albuquerque at a gym called Jackson Winks, which is, I would not hesitate to say, top 3 MMA gyms in the world. And they talk a lot about how they get kids off the street, they give them an outlet to channel their aggressive energy a lot of the time, keeps them off the streets and gets them out of scenarios where they would be making bad decisions. Yeah. But it also gives them a reason to get up in the morning. It gives them something bigger themselves. It gives them drive. I asked him about that, and he was like, "Oh yeah, absolutely, totally agree." And he went on to talk about the local soccer team, and apparently they wanted to sponsor the local police department. They were like, "Well, we can't put stuff on the cars." But consequently they had a relationship with the local soccer team. But he said to me, he's like, "Have you been to the gym?" I was like, "No." He's like, "Oh, I know the guy up there." So he made a phone call. He's like, "Yeah, it's just up the road. They'll be waiting for you." I was like, "Cool." He's like, "Oh, do you want a lift?" So we got a lift in a cop car. We're in the back of this cop car and we're at the traffic lights. Yeah. It's 3 guys look out the window and there's this old little granny in her car. And we're like waving at her. She looks terrified. And then she looks at the cop in the front like laughing, and then she's like, she got it. Right. So we pull up at the gym. We got a tour around the gym, which for me was an amazing experience. And we got to write our names on the wall, which is generally reserved for, champion fighters, high profile celebrities. So we were immortalized in the walls of this gym, but it really did highlight for me the power of not just sport, but the power of, and going back to what we were saying before about where does entertainment lie? Yeah. A lot of people think that entertainment and kind of, activities and pursuits are purely there as a kind of distraction, as an opportunity to unplug from your real life. Yeah. And I definitely do think that we all need that, and we do need some kind of free headspace. But what a lot of it does is, as I said before, it gives us something to care about. Yeah. It gives us something to be invested in, and it gives us a practice or an outlet for energy that otherwise would probably be used negatively. Yeah, for sure. So I thought that was amazing. And to go back into the whole trip, for me, it was, Shaun said to me, it was life-changing. And when we first got there, the guys at Cultural Vistas, who were the guys doing the tours, mentioned Shaun's journey and how the trip had motivated you to quit your job and become a full-time vlogger. So immediately that was just a powerful thing to hear. Yeah. And you told me in a little bit more detail about all the amazing things the rest of the people on your trip had been through as a consequence of that. Yeah.
So like on our group, I think it's always been, is it 10 people or 8 people? I can't remember.
Yeah, around about that.
And also just to say, it's very diverse in terms of where people are from and their backgrounds, race, religion, all that kind of stuff. Oh yeah. So they try and take a couple of people from each different place and scenario and stuff. So there's usually 2 or 3 from Scotland, Northern Ireland, England. Yeah,
it wasn't just a group of 10 Scottish extreme unicyclists.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And out of that group, we were all kind of at the same stage, very early in our content creation careers. I had 10,000 subscribers at the time. Like I said, just quit my job to do this properly. And now if I look at the other guys, right, on the trip, You know, one of them's been like a record-breaking book author. Sharira, she's done amazing things. Hussein, like he just performed at Glastonbury, for goodness sake. There's been all these massive success stories of people on our trip who changed their lives after this Exploring American Values trip. And I'm not sure that was what the intention of the US government is, to change the lives of a bunch of British vloggers and bloggers and whatever. But it's a happy consequence for us.
Yeah. Well, for me, like a big reason why I wanted to have this chat with you was because I wanted to have a retrospective on the trip, but I wanted to do something of quality with the content that I got while I was there. I didn't want it to just be a trip. And as we touched on, there's no obligation to create anything. They don't tell you what to say. They said you could have a free holiday and go home.
Yeah.
But I felt, going back to this idea of responsibility, I felt like I had a responsibility to do something worthwhile with the content I'd taken.
Yeah.
And that's why we're sat here now. And that was the effect that trip had on me. And so if I was gonna kind of sing the praises of the program as a whole and try and not do it from the point of view of I had an amazing experience, it was life-changing for me, I would say that if you can empower people like us, people who are creating content in all different areas. So we had a guy who's a poet as well. We had people who were working in politics or working in the written medium, but also, you know, massive on Twitter. We had people massive on Instagram and YouTube.
They're all storytellers.
Exactly.
In one sense or another.
And all different audiences too, as you say, like people from different social backgrounds, people black, white, Asian, all talking to different people about different things. Yeah. And I think that's the impact it has, is you're harnessing the abilities and the skills of those people. You're fueling them, and you're using that as a way to affect change in their reach. And obviously, selfishly, they want it to promote America. And I will say, I mean, we got the good, the bad, and the ugly. Yeah. But overall, because of that, it was an incredible experience. Absolutely. It was real, and it was something that will last with me forever. And I genuinely hope that the people at the embassy, the people that I met, get as much out of this as I did.
Yeah, so, for sure. I mean, I think, like I said, it didn't have such an impact on my life, but hopefully I've been able to return that through telling stories, which, just in terms of stats, have affected literally millions of people. Millions of people have watched it. So, you know, whether that's what they wanted or not, I don't know. But I know from that trip, you know, I'll continue to build that connection between principally Scotland and the United States of America, people from America, which I can only see as being a positive going forward. It's made me think a lot deeper about different issues in the United States. And it's probably taught me a lot to be less reactive to stuff. I just see it in the moment, right?
And it's going to be even easier for us, Shaun, to spread our message when we become the new hosts of The Late Show, replacing James Corden.
Nobody's supposed to know about that yet.
Cut.
How to conclude this? I don't even know. Like, it's not concluded. For me, it's not concluded as well.
No, exactly.
Right?
And also, they're really good about that, because they say that they want to have a relationship with you. You're now a US Embassy alumni. Yeah. And actually, we both went to the 4th of July celebrations.
I think it's up to us. Like, what do we make of it?
Yeah.
And how do we take action on it? Like,
yeah. And hopefully it enables us to have a great relationship with you, the American audience.
For sure. Yeah, it was a tremendously positive experience. And yes, a journalist did find out about this trip this year and thought it was very weird. I don't blame them for finding it weird when you first look into it, right? But from the positive impact it's had on everybody, I think there's probably been about 30 people over the last 3 years that have done this trip. I think the positive impact, both on the creators and on audiences, has been, you know, pretty much immeasurable. So yes, and while a lot of people have pointed out, and the journalists included, these are American tax dollars that they're spending to run this trip. But I think, all things told, those are tax dollars well spent.
I think it's testament to what you said at the start about how this has always happened, and it was old media, not new media.
Exactly.
And I think that article is a reflection of how old media feel threatened by new media. Influencer is a thing that Shaun and I have gone back and forth with. It's something that we spoke about a lot on our trip. What does that mean? It already presupposes the effect of your content as opposed to the content itself. So it is a word that I wrestle with. But what it certainly shows is that if the US Embassy are willing to get people who are independent content creators who speak directly to their audience, they're willing to fund a trip for them in order to disseminate information, in order to, you know, create relationships between two countries, then the old media will be shaking in their boots, and it's the changing of the guard. They're no longer the gatekeepers of information.
Exactly.
They're no longer the people that they look to kind of educate the masses, for lack of a better term. And I think that lack of control now, I think it's great for us. It's great for the people who consume content, and maybe not great for these corporations. But I'm glad the USMC is embracing it.
Well,
and
that's
it's the
it.
future.
It's been very brave of them, I'd say, to do this. But I think one of the things about the word influencer, it's been turned into this dirty word by the media, rightfully because of all the scandals that have happened with various different people that might be referred to as an influencer. I prefer the word storyteller, content creator, because that's what we do. Do I influence people or not? Like, that's debatable. Even if the answer is yes to that, it's still a pretentious word, right?
Yeah.
That's a pretentious title. But anyway, for me, this is just about telling stories as I see them. Like I said, there's been so many examples of people who've been on this. It's just been so impactful. So
Definitely.
I know from my perspective, when I came back from this trip, I was a bit of an emotional wreck, right? Because there's some things I told you about. There was a lot of heavy issues, and I came back and I literally took like a month of just like deep thought and without being able to really know how to respond. And then since then, I've made a shitload of content on my channels about it after deep reflection. But definitely when I came back, it was like, bang, what do I do now? So how are you, now it's been about a month since you came back, right? So how are you feeling and what are you thinking about the next moves?
Yeah, well, like I said, like when I was there, I felt so kind of, I had a fire in my belly, and I felt really energized to do more with what I do in terms of the content I create, but also just to do more for the world. It sounds crazy and it sounds a bit ostentatious, but I mean it. And one thing I was really worried about was coming back and losing that. It's really easy to just get back in the slipstream and back to reality. So I've been quite fortunate that the time I've been back, I've done a lot of stuff with you, including the USMC stuff, so it's kept it fresh. Because we kind of share the same desire, and have shared a very similar experience, and are, occupy a very similar world. That's been really helpful, I guess, to keep each other accountable. In terms of a plan for the future, I'd love to go back to America. I would love to engage more American people. I'd love to hear from more American people as to whether my content is relevant to them, because I really do think it's universal. It's not necessarily about what patch of grass you happen to be standing on. And just like to do more for people who feel like they need it, and I know that sounds really vague and it sounds a little bit, I have a dream, but it could be something as simple as, hey Jason, I love what you're doing, I wish I could do that, whatever that is. If that's riding a unicycle, doing flips, lifting heavy weights, or just, living a healthy lifestyle, or creating content, wherever that content may be. Storyteller is a great term, and again, it does sound a little bit obnoxious in some respects.
Essentially, it's a new journalist, right?
Yeah, but I think like storytelling is at the heart of every culture. We all tell each other. Back to
cavemen.
Yeah, exactly. We all tell each other stories, and that's where the best lessons come from. There's a reason why the majority of religions tell parables and fables, is because the way that you learn things, the kind of archetypes in life, are best illustrated and most powerful when they're told in a story. Yeah. And I think it's just about being able to tell your story, being able to tell the story of the world around you, and then hopefully, being able to tell other people's stories too. So as kind of, elitist and snobby and artistic as it sounds, I think storytelling is one of the most important things, and I'd love to keep doing that on a bigger scale. For
sure. Well, I think, that's probably, we've touched on a lot there, a lot to digest, but I'm sure we're going to continue this discussion among ourselves, and I look forward to the content you create from your trip.
Thank you.
And see how you progress with that. But otherwise, like, if any of you guys in my audience haven't checked Jason out, make sure you do. I'll put the links down below. We'll be doing all kinds of stuff, whether that's fitness related or challenges or other stuff. We'll be doing that, I'm sure, in the near future.
What do you want to see Shaun do with me? Let us know. We're men of the people.
Yeah.
We'll make it happen.
We'll make it happen. So thank you very much for watching this massive interview. This is going to be an epic video, but until next time.
Thanks for having us, guys. America.
Just another barbecue in Scotland.